And we've always had this arms race, which is as soon as they have that vulnerability, we have to fix it. As soon as we have that vulnerability, we have to fix it. And I think it's the same thing with AI. As soon as they have this capability of, oh my God, they can do 1 million operations a second by completely automate the pen test against 1 million companies at once or whatever. Great. Well, now we have the AI so that we can detect when this stuff is happening. And so we have this arms race, I think, is just going to continue up. As soon as the AI becomes smart enough to do some sort of hack, the AI is going to become smart enough to detect that hack.
My guest today probably doesn't need an introduction, since he's the host of one of the largest and most beloved cybersecurity podcasts in the world. That's right. My guest today is the voice of Darknet Diaries, Jack Rhysider. Through Darknet Diaries, Jack has brought the drama and the fascinating underworld of the internet to life through his great blend of storytelling and interviews with those hackers and criminals, law enforcement, and others.
They build bots and tools and hacking scripts and all this kind of stuff and see how far they can push it. And then that takes them to the next level of like, well, I was just screwing around, but wait a minute, some of my friends are actually making money with this. Well, hold on, let me see what that is. And of course, that's just the next step.
Jack, as you will see, is also a champion of personal privacy in our increasingly surveilled world. He goes to great lengths to maintain his privacy, which includes appearing on podcasts like The Watchers without showing his face.
There's this thing called the third-party doctrine, which is if you give your data to a third party or any company, then the government no longer thinks that you have a reasonable right to that privacy. You obviously don't care about your privacy, so we're not going to use the Fourth Amendment here. We're allowed to ask that company for all your data, and that company has to comply with the government.
Jack and I had a great conversation on all of that and more, and I really can't thank him enough for sharing his time with us on The Watchers. And now, here's Jack Rhysider. Well, Jack Rhysider of infamy, you might say, of Darknet Diaries. Thank you so much for coming on The Watchers today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So you're a guy who I don't see make a lot of public appearances. One just in terms of podcasting, but when you do appear in public, you appear as you appear now, which is in some form of disguise. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that there's like a character arc that I think I've gone through here, which is I cover stories about hackers and breaches and all this sort of thing. And after a while, I realized, that there's no way to avoid getting in a breach. My data is going to be in a data breach again and again and again. And a lot of times people just feel this fatigue of like, yeah, well, it's all out there, so I'll just like let it all burn or whatever. I don't care anymore. But I've actually gone the opposite way. I've said, okay, well, if my data is absolutely going to be in a breach, I might as well not use my real data. And that way, at least I have some sort of control over my data and where it gets out. And so that has kind of turned me into a privacy extremist almost, right? Where it's just like the more and more not giving my data, the better I feel about, okay, there was a breach, but it had some other name. It wasn't my actual name. It wasn't my real phone number. It wasn't my actual credit card. I don't really care. And of course, I don't reuse passwords or even email addresses. And going to all these extremes, now I don't feel so, worried about breaches and all this sort of stuff. And so I think it started there, but then I just learned more and more about privacy, and it just keeps growing. And I think the bigger my show gets, the bigger I get into privacy as well, because I do get worried about the internet just being this place that just comes at you with torches and pitchforks and stuff. And I'm just like, I want to keep that distance. So being a private creator is just something that I've really gotten into lately.
Well, I like that you use the term extremist, because I certainly from the outside the industry, I'm sure it seems very extreme. Even inside, a lot of cybersecurity influencers and talking heads and people with audiences have kind of, as you've talked about, like kind of said, yeah, it is what it is. My data's out there. It's all going to get compromised. So even amongst the folks who get it, I think you're a rarity, and you're going to great lengths to protect your privacy.
Yeah, I think if you ever had like a relationship, that how much they know about you, right? They might even know your password. Yeah. But then when you break up with them, they don't know anything anymore. They don't know where you live or what your passwords are or who you're talking with or what music you're into. And even if your data is out there, there's a way to just stop it and cut it off. And now they don't know what you're doing today or tomorrow or the next or years from now, right? And so just think about that as far as past relationships go. Yeah, they had everything on me. So does that mean I can continue feeding them even though we're not in a relationship anymore? Like
Right.
that relationship of data brokers and big data having my data is over. And yeah, they might have some historical stuff, but I always laugh at like, oh wow, that was like 20 years ago I lived at that address. Good luck finding me now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, anytime you do like any sort of like credit application, and they'll do like the thing to validate your identity by asking addresses, you're like, oh yeah, I did live there. That was like my first apartment.
Yeah.
Like, that's just out there. That's trackable.
Yeah.
You told a story on one of the podcasts that I watched you on, where you talked about some of your privacy measures, and you mentioned like even going to the car mechanic, like giving them a false name, because the car mechanic doesn't care who you are really. They just need to know how to contact you and whatnot. And I thought, as you told that story, like, just how would I explain to like my wife if I went to like a car mechanic and gave a false name, and like, she was with me when I went to pick it up, and they, called out some false name, and I went up there and was like, yep, that's my car. Just again, from the outside, it must seem so extreme, but I think maybe we're not taking
it does feel
privacy
strange
seriously
at
enough.
first, but then you get used to it. You start realizing this is more common. This is the everyday life of just using a bunch of fake names. And at some point, you start feeling like whenever someone knows you by your real name or calls you by your real name, you're like, what? How do you know that? Like, what? This is so private. This is private information. Where did you get this? It's like, well, you told me that. Oh yeah, okay, fine. And so it's like your real name becomes such a sensitive thing after a while when you use fake names so much.
Yeah, well, then that probably keys you in on who really knows you versus who doesn't.
Yeah.
So anyone who comes up and actually says your name must be like, oh, you really know what's going on.
Yeah.
Other than when you're in your very noticeable disguise.
Yeah.
Which is now
Even
like iconic
even in
in and of
person.
itself.
You're right. Even in person, when I go to DEFCON and I like to meet with a lot of people, and I'll wear a big black hat and a bandana over my face and dark sunglasses, and you can't really see my face much at all. So there's still a disguise in person, and it's really fun to keep that going. It's almost like
Have you found
an avatar, a character of some kind too, because people can remember that character. Like, oh yeah, that's Jack. That's the character in my mind, right? And there's something just magical about that, almost like superhero-like, and not a real person so much, right? And I'll keep that real person hidden, and just show you a specific character that I have.
Well, I imagine at the at the size and of the audience that you've built now. I looked at your YouTube recently, and you're basically at 500,000 folks just there, let alone the audio podcast, which I imagine's either as big or bigger in terms of listeners. And as someone who's listened to probably every episode, anytime you listen to somebody for that amount of time, you start to think you know them. Like, you tell a lot of personal stories, especially in the intros to your podcast, where you're kind of like setting the stage for the topic that's going to come up in this episode. And so I imagine a lot of people get the sense, that they do know you. And then you have this persona, like you said, this sort of like superhero that shows up to DEFCON in your superhero costume, and people approach you to talk about all that.
Yeah.
How
It's
much
really
of
funny.
that is, the real you?
Yeah, it's a version of me, that's for sure. There's a lot of me in there. But what's interesting is after a while, I felt comfortable enough that I started using a more closer version of my voice, my speaking voice in private. Because it is kind of not so much a radio announcer voice, but there is just like a storytelling character that I kind of put on when I'm telling you this story. But I went more towards like, this is, what, I'll say things. I'll say things the way that I normally say things. And a lot of people in Reddit, they were like, oh man, this is I don't like the way Jack's voice is anymore. This is a weird thing. And the way he tells stories is so annoying. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is so fascinating to me because number one, the fact that they could hear the difference in the inflection of some of the things, like I would use a rising tone in a way that they didn't like or something. And it was unusual. And so the fact that they could catch that was just a testament of how well they knew me. They knew my voice. but it was also a testament of like me being comfortable enough to try my normal voice a little bit more with them. And so even negative feedback like that, I hate this new voice that he's trying, is hilarious to me, because it just solidifies the idea of how close we are with each other. Like I'm more comfortable, trying this voice, and I didn't even realize I was. And then you're definitely noticing it, and that's just amazing to me.
Have you, with your privacy, obviously you said you're sort of like a character arc as it relates to your privacy. As Darknet Diaries has become larger and larger, have you had to double down and get even more focus on privacy? Are you finding, evidence that people are trying to compromise your privacy ever?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there was another character arc that I had thought about that might happen at making the show, which is, wow, now I know how ransomware gangs work. Now I know how these hackers are stealing millions of dollars. I have all the techniques. Like, let's just like learn from them and go do all the cybercrime. Like, that was another character arc
And you have a great
possibility.
network too.
Yeah. But I'm glad I didn't go that way, because I've never been a hoodlum in that way. I've always been very rule following. But the privacy is definitely something that I see people poking at. I'll see like forum posts and stuff of people trying to guess who I am, saying, "Hey, I found this other guy on YouTube, and it sounds exactly like Jack, and so I think I found who he is," and they're trying to expose me and stuff, and I find that always interesting. Every now and then there is something that I screw up on, and people will send me a note and say, "Hey, is this a picture of you, or is this where you live?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" Like the biggest one was, what did I have? I had a Fitbit, and the Fitbit was connected to Strava, and somehow I used an email address to log into Strava with, which was connected to Jack. And so somebody looked up my email and was able to figure out, because Strava is a running app, and it's not a
Right.
running app. It's a social media app. It's all about you connecting to other runners and commenting on them and their runs, and them following you and cheering each other on. It's a social media app. It's not a running app. And I didn't realize that. And I thought it was just a running app, but it was trying so hard to connect me with a million other people. And that made my email address exposed. And so somebody found it and saw where I was running in my neighborhoods and such. And like, oh, look at that. I see where you're going on Tuesdays. I'm like, holy crap, this is awful. So I had to delete that. But then, yeah, there's something that I slip up on or didn't realize. And it just shocks me. There's things where phone number searches are becoming a bigger thing, where, if you had my phone number, you can look it up and see all, like, there's just tons of different services that I've signed up for, LinkedIn, Facebook. Like you can kind of do a reverse search to find someone's account just with their phone number. And these things I didn't know were possible. So people are showing me this sometimes. And reverse photo searches and such. So if they get any photo at all of me, they can then use, I think PimEyes is one of the tools, to then say, are there any other photos of this person online? And it's not just like, let's look specifically for this photo. Let's do a facial recognition and then look for all the other photos out there and see if we can do a match of this person. And so this shows me in places that, I didn't even know there were photos taken of me there. And it's just wild that even just one slip up of having your photo open will show you a whole world of things for that person.
Yeah, and all the steps you've taken, the effort to go to seems significant. And now, if I think about if I tried to accomplish the same, I mean, that's just like the wildest bobcat to try to shove back into a bag.
Mm-hmm.
It's everywhere. That data is prolific. And I think about, you mentioned phone numbers. I've had the same phone number for 20 years. And, for the first 10 years of it, I would give it out to whatever service requested it. The number of times have I been pwned has shown, my data involved in something.
You're on the top list of have I been pwned, like number one pwned guy.
I mean, I was signed up for everything back in the day on the early internet. Just sure, you got my phone number, you got my personal email. I've had to change personal email a couple times just to, dig yourself out of the spam, but always had the same phone number. So it does feel insurmountable at this point to try to
And
step that stuff back, and it seems like it's only going to get more difficult.
what I think is also very difficult is when like you just said, switching email addresses, using some of these services, you kind of like that big backlog of emails of like, oh, I can search, 20 years of emails. This is great.
Yeah.
And I've learned how to just totally get rid of a whole history of stuff because I was a Gmail user for a long time, but then I'm like, gosh, Google has so much history of me by just being able to look at all this stuff. They could build a huge profile on me and learn a lot about where I am and what I'm doing and all this sort of thing. So learning how to let go of that, because it is such a valuable almost knowledge base of like, oh, you can look at all the emails and see when I got that new car or medical treatment or whatever it is, like it's just all there in documentation. And yeah, letting go of that is a big step, because I think the smaller footprint I have of like my data is in these lakes, it's in these categories, it's in these buckets, and is a liability at times, right? And so not only am I trying to use services that do end-to-end encryption or can't see my data, but I'm also trying to just minimize my amount of data as possible. And that's another one that's to put it back in the box is really difficult, because it's hard to let go of this. So I use a lot of local storage now and store photos here in my house, and anything that's important stores here, and try not to store anything important on the cloud. Anything that's out there on the cloud, I'm just expecting that's going to get out at some point. There's an inevitable data breach in the future, and it's going to get out. And so that's just how I treat that data.
Do you think, if not for Darknet Diaries and becoming sort of a public person, do you think you'd still have the same focus on privacy to the level that you're at?
No, probably not. I think it's kind of one of those lies that I tell myself, where like, oh no, I'm a security guy, so of course, I'm keeping the house secure, I'm keeping myself private and all that sort of thing. But then you're like, I think I'll cut some corners here, and it's not that bad if I don't update this app for a few months, like, how it is, like you get lazy. And so I think that's probably the space that I'd be in. I'd be telling myself that this is all very important to me, and it's what I've dedicated my life to is security, but not actually following the right advice that I even give myself. So yeah, I think it would be more of a theater thing than a real thing. And now it's like, no, I want to, if there's something, I want to try it, and let's see how it goes. Recently I have a graphene phone, and this is like a version of Android that is de-Googled, right? So there's no Google on my phone. But this means that I can't use my phone to pay at the at the checkouts, right? Because you can usually just have Google Wallet and then swipe your phone. So because it's graphene, the operating system's been changed, and so Google's like, oh, we're not letting you put a wallet on this. This is, I don't know what operating system this is, so it just won't work. But there are watches out there that can have Google Wallet on the watch.
Okay.
And so I've been trying to put a credit card on the watch and then letting that do the payment, but the watch has to sync with the phone. And so there's this whole thing of this dance of like, okay, once a week I'll let you sync with a Google Wallet on a phone, like a dedicated phone, just that you could sync with. But I'm not taking that phone out of the house. It's just because the watch doesn't need the constant sync. So but then I'm like, wait, I don't want to use my real credit card. Is there a way that I can buy a gift card and put that on the watch so that I'm scanning just a gift card when I want to buy something at the store? And like, these are the crazy like weekend projects that I try out and spend so much time trying to get over just to get like a card to work on my watch in a most private way.
Yeah, and all that again, it's like such a great length. And you're a security professional, so all those things that have to happen. I wonder about like laymen, people who consumers who want to protect their privacy. It's just all the cards are stacked against them.
Yeah,
just from the amount of inconvenience it causes to try to not participate in that. I mean, I was just thinking, I can't remember the last time I pulled my wallet out. I pay with my phone or my watch everywhere because it's so prolific. But that's telling Google exactly where I spend my money, what I spend it on.
But if you think about
that cat hard put back in the bag.
It sure is. But if you think about 10, 20 years ago, how we were doing our computers then. It was very run it yourself. Like there's the email. I
Yeah.
guess we'll have to just run our own email as service or storage. There was no Dropbox 20 years ago, right? And so if you want to store, there was no Google Photos or Apple Photos. So if you want to store photos, it's either on your phone or personal computer or on a hard drive, right? And so that was just the way we did things. And since I grew up in that space of like, oh, you back up your photos to an external hard drive, I just kind of kept that. And even though things have
Yeah.
gotten way easier where it's like, no, you snap a photo and it just automatically goes to Google Photos and you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, that is so much convenient, but I got used to being okay running my own servers at home during the time that it's not that much of an inconvenience to me to try these other things. And I love tinkering and building and trying to break the rules in ways that like this phone and watch shouldn't work together, but let's see if we can get it to work together, right? So there is that fun aspect of getting things to work where they shouldn't. And then you're like, all right, this is great. Now I can pay anonymously for a cup of coffee without the whole credit industry knowing that I just bought coffee today.
Yeah, so that's a satisfying end to that project. I'm kind of like you, where I do a lot of my passion for tech and cybersecurity still comes from the little tinkering projects, the things that I probably shouldn't be spending my time working on when I've got work objectives that I'm not getting to. But I love a good weekend of spinning up like the latest Linux distro that's making waves, getting that spun up. Don't have a total use case for it, but hey, let me see if I can spin this thing up and get it doing something useful. Still love doing that sort of stuff, and that's part of what keeps my my passion for it alive, which is a good segue for what I want to get into around Darknet Diaries. You mentioned the internet of 10, 20 years ago. And one of the things that I wanted to tell you about Darknet Diaries for me, from like a personal impact, one of the things I love about it is it kind of recaptures that early internet magic, just the stories that appear there, and going back to that time where it was less corporatized. It was very like, it wasn't just Reddit as the only place you could go. It was forums for every specific interest. I went to so many forums. I had forum accounts, and that's again probably where I gave my phone number to everybody. That was such a unique and special time on the internet, and there was just a lot of figuring stuff out, breaking stuff. I was learning how to overclock CPUs back in the day, which I don't know that anyone does that anymore because it's gotten so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I just love that vibe in Darknet Diaries. It's so nostalgic for that early internet.
Yeah, I feel that too because I grew up in the early internet as well, and so it was a magical place to just explore. And somebody told me this concept the other day, which is interesting. The concept of the difference between explore versus exploit, where you have somebody hacking things, breaking into servers, companies, whatever. I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, it was phone phreaking, right? And so you'd break into the phone company and see if you could get a phone to ring somewhere, and that was just the explore part of it. There wasn't really exploit. They weren't trying to exploit the company. They were just exploring it because this is the biggest network in the world. The phone system is the biggest network we've ever seen. So if we could get into that, that'd be amazing, right? And so it was very much the exploration aspect of it, and that somehow did. I don't. I mean, we look at these waves as well of, when I started in the 90s, like, okay, so you got the freakers in the 80s, right? And then the 90s was like wares and piracy. And you were downloading things off IRC. And that was sort of the internet counterculture of, we know that we're not supposed to be doing this stuff of stealing music and stuff like that, but let's all do it. And so we did it. But then in the early 2000s, you had Anonymous that showed up, and that was the internet counterculture of let's do some protesting, but we'll do it online. So we'll DDoS all these companies we don't like. And then we have here, we're in the 2020s, and it's like, well, what's the counterculture today, right? And so I know it's got to be there. There's something happening. And so I think is what's going on now is this thing called the comms, the community. And this is kind of dark parts of Roblox or cryptocurrency or Discord, where people are saying, you know what, there's a lot of cryptocurrency out there, or a lot of digital currency such as Robux or V-Bucks or whatever. Is there a way that we can steal this from other people? And they're very much money driven, but there's these huge communities that are like, let's get together and come up with plans on making money illegally online. And I think there's
You
this
have a whole episode, Dirty
yeah,
Comms, right? That covers
that's
this.
right. Yeah, and it was just doing that episode just made me reflect on, yeah, it's easy to like point at these kids of like, oh yeah, you guys are doing stupid things, but each decade we've had this like wave of we all did stupid things, and it's fascinating to just look at each decade like that and say, oh wait a minute, yeah, this is just an evolution. This just keeps going, and I wonder what the 2030s are going to bring us.
Yeah, there's always been, you call it a counterculture. There's always been that that group that's not always, they're doing stupid stuff, but not always motivated by the criminality aspect of things, but just the exploration. One of the first things that blew my mind, I went to this tech conference in high school, and a fellow high school student did a social engineering talk, and in front of a bunch of other, geeky high schoolers, called like a local Blockbuster or something and convinced a guy to go around flushing the toilets, claiming he was like a plumber remotely diagnosing a plumbing issue. It was hilarious, but it just sort of like demonstrated the power of social engineering. But it was totally harmless. It was to show like, hey, you can get people to do things that are silly just because you can, if you just say the right things. Interesting where things are at now, with things like cryptocurrency. You mentioned Roblox, and I think that's a big part of the Dirty Comms episode, where they've almost formed these teenager gangs to rob each other of those virtual currencies, and I guess they can make a lot of money doing that.
Yeah, I think there's just a million different aspects here. There's credits you can get from going shopping and stuff, where you're like, oh, you shop here enough, you'll get credits, and then you can use those credits for free items. Like they're like, well, let's try to steal these credits from people, right? So it's so many different places. But Roblox seems to be a game, and I suppose Minecraft as well, where there was just a lot of teenagers growing up with this in their life. And so when you grow up on the internet and you're like, well, what do? Oh, you play Roblox, you play Minecraft. That's when you start building your community and your tribe, and you're like, well, what are you guys up to? Well, we're trying to break this game. We're trying to exploit it. Oh, wow. Show me how it's done. Right. And so it almost seems like, I've definitely seen a trend over time that video games is a starting point for a lot of hackers, where they're playing games quite a bit. They get bored with the game and they're like, well, I don't care if I get banned from this game or this game. I never play this game again, but let's just go out, in some sort of blaze of glory and see if we could just take this whole place down, right? And so they build bots and tools and hacking scripts and all this kind of stuff and see how far they can push it. And sometimes it's pretty wild what they can do. And then that takes them to the next level of like, well, I was just screwing around, but wait a minute, some of my friends are actually making money with this. Well, hold on, let me see what that is. And of course, that's just the next step. So I'm not saying video games lead you to cybercrime, but I am saying a lot of cyber criminals started in video games and got bored and just started hacking the game.
Yeah, I can think through some of, again, the Darknet Diaries episodes, and that does sound like a theme that I've heard, where a lot of the folks you've interviewed kind of start there, and they start with, okay, I'm deep in this world, this video game. I want to learn more about it. I want to learn how it works. And then there's the temptation to exploit it, to get ahead. And then it just sort of extrapolates, and you have some of these highly talented hackers now where that's their starting point. One of the other episodes that comes to mind, because I think this is probably one of the biggest ones, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, is Xbox Underground, just from a fascination. Anytime I talk about Darknet Diaries and I tell someone like, hey, you got to check out this podcast, that's typically one of the 2 or 3 episodes I point to, just because it starts so innocuous from like hey, we're going to try to hack this video game console, and it ends with some pretty serious consequences for people. And if I recall correctly, there's loss of life involved at the end of that.
Yeah, that one's one of my favorites too, and I think it is pretty much a favorite of most listeners. I think that's episode 45 and 46, but one of the reasons why I think it's so good is because I spent a year making it, right? So um,
Makes sense.
what happened was one of the main characters of that episode reached out when he got out of prison. I think he said, like, I don't know who you are, but I've been told to share my story with you. And well, I like to respond in situations like that where I don't know who this person is. I'm just like, well, can you show me your police report? Like, yeah, here's my indictment. Holy cow, what is this? And so it started there. And then I was like, you know what? This is one of these stories that I think I should do properly. Let me interview multiple people. Let me interview the same person again and again. Have, tell me more and more and more. And let's spend hours on the phone. Let's not just do this as fast as I can to get the publication date out, right? Just get the next episode out. No, this one I'm going to work on very slowly. So I built maps of like who's who, and this was tricky because there's people's real names, and then there's people's online names, and then there's their nicknames that they're calling each other, which is like, wait, hold on, you keep calling this guy this, but I don't have that name on my list anymore. Oh, that's just what I call him. Oh, okay. So it was just so hard to like get through all the names and then the timeline, and then there's just so many moving parts, and I really had to get my head into it. And then I was like, okay, I've got the story. I know where it begins, where it ends, and all this sort of thing, and just really spent a long time on it. And I didn't want to shorten it any time that it needed to be shortened or fluff it up in ways that it needed to be fluffed up. I was like, this is going to be my best episode ever if I spend a year on it. And sure, and I did spend a year on it, and I think it was absolutely worth it because it made that episode shine, and it made a lot of noise in a lot of different circles. And this is one of the things I like doing as well, is like that one's all about video games, Xbox, obviously. And so that didn't just reverberate through the cybersecurity world, but it made a lot of echoes through the gaming world as well. And I love scooping up these extra audiences of like, hey, you like game hacking? I got a whole bunch of episodes for you guys. And so it's really fun to see it bounce around in new circles.
Another audience I think you've probably grabbed a bit of, the world I tend to operate in. So I run a cybersecurity firm that focuses on working with defense contractors. So I'm in the defense space and the national security space. And the Watchers podcast, we talk to a lot of national security folks who do cyber policy or cyber practitioners in the space. The Stuxnet episode is the one that I typically direct them to, because everyone in the the national security sector has heard of Stuxnet. And hearing how that happened, I can't remember the name of the journalist that's on that episode, but
Kim Zetter, she wrote the book on it.
Yes, that's right. What's the name of the book? Do you remember? It's like Zero.
Countdown to Zero Day, I believe.
Yeah. Great episode, but having heard of Stuxnet prior, because I've been in cybersecurity in the space, that actual breakdown blew my mind of just the sophistication and the fact that it was discovered and it might not have been discovered. And I think you even make the point in that episode, like, remember, this is the one that we've discovered how sophisticated it was. Think of what's out there that we didn't discover. And that was what, 2009? Like, how much crazier must it be now, almost 20 years later?
Yeah, it's wild. And it also is fascinating to me that people from the NSA and such do reach out and say, yeah, we have our new recruits listen to some of these episodes because we want them to understand how we're operating, and you've covered it so well. I'm like, wow. So it does go around in the national defense circles as well. I think they're fascinated by it, which is funny because then when I'm writing an episode, I'm like, ooh, I can actually speak to these people. Like I can say, hey, stop building 0 days and start fixing things instead, or something, right? And I can try to influence them in some way, and it's fascinating. I remember also I went to Washington D.C. last January and got a meeting with one of the advisors for one of the senators, and they were a tech advisor, right? So senators have many advisors, and one is obviously tech. So when I met him, he's like, "Oh yeah, I've listened to most of your episodes." And I'm like, "Holy cow! It's crazy that I'm in the ear of the advisor for the senator, who's like, hey, sir, I think we should, make these changes or whatever." And it's just fascinating that the reach that the show goes to and how far it goes, because I think it has a broad appeal, which is everyone is on the internet today. Everyone has a cell phone. Everyone's using computers, and there's something about like, well, what's this thing capable of, and what are the dark aspects of it and all this sort of thing. And I think people have this curiosity and our interest, and you don't really have to be tech savvy in order to understand what's going on here. But I also don't want to, I've never really picked a side. Like, there's a lot of people who say, when you're podcasting, you should pick an audience and focus on that. And the option would be non-tech people or tech people. Which one should I pick? And I never really picked a side on who I'm talking to. I want them both to be fascinated with it. And it's tricky because if I speak to like the non-tech person, then that becomes slow and boring. It's like, oh my gosh, this is such a, I know all this. Why is he explaining this? And so I really try to treat the non-tech people as a lot smarter than they act, because they're like, oh, I don't know anything about tech. Okay, but you do know all IP address is. Yeah, oh yeah, I know, of course I know what that is. And an URL. Yeah, well, geez, I don't even have to explain any of this stuff to you. I can just jump right into like what matters. And so it's really a testament to people are a lot smarter about tech than they lead on about. And if I cater to like just like speak to them like they're 5, even 5-year-olds know a lot about tech. It's amazing. I don't think it's doing anyone a service. And so I speak to them as adults. Like, look, I'm expecting you to have finished school, probably done some college. Like, a lot about the world. Let's just go from there, right? And not treat you like you're some imbecile about tech. And so I think because of that, it doesn't lose the people who are techie, who also know this stuff already. But it's so we don't slow down too much. But then I also want to sprinkle in some cool stuff for the techie people to be like, oh, that is the actual command that happened or something like that, so that they can learn something too. And that's always been a kind of a fun fence to walk. Of try not to be too slow, but try not to be too techie at the same time, and get everyone happy.
Yeah, well, I think you've walked that line super well. It's one of the few quote unquote work related podcasts I can put on without having to have my earbuds in, like on a road trip, because it's entertaining. It's got sort of like a true crime podcast, which are huge. It is true crime that you're talking about in a lot of the episodes. It just happens to be in this sphere, which just adds like another layer of fascination to me as a practitioner.
Yeah.
Get the excitement of the true crime, but get it with that spin on it.
Right. Yeah. That's, I think that's where it started for me. I was like, where is the true crime podcast that is focused on the stuff that I love, which is internet and cybersecurity and all this stuff, and I couldn't find it, so I just decided that I should probably make it. So when you said that it's specifically fascinating to me, that's why I laughed, because I'm like, yes, I feel the same way. That's why I started the show.
Yeah, and like I said, there's nostalgia, because I remember early internet, seeing. I didn't do much in the way of hacking. I do want to ask you if you remember what the first thing you hacked was, but I didn't do any of it, but I was in communities where that was happening, and I was kind of following along and seeing, people bragging about the antics they would pull off, and just always found that fascinating. And this now taps that curiosity, gives me the story I always wanted to hear without having to have done, the dangerous things or the stupid things that had consequences,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to ask you, do you remember the first thing you hacked?
Yeah, I think
point a finger at one thing.
There was, growing up with video games and computers and such, I was really fascinated with the save game files, because somewhere in that data shows you how much money you have in the game and what level you're on and how you've progressed and stuff. And so I would look at these save game files to try to make sense of them sometimes. And I didn't get anywhere for quite a long time. And it was also fascinating, like, certain, I think you could play like a Nintendo game and put in a code, and then it would like jump you to a certain level or something like that. And so I didn't know if that was people hacking it to get them to, go to those levels, or if there was something like, and so all this stuff really fascinated me. But it was SimCity that I was finally like, okay, let's look at this in depth. And of course, it makes no sense at all. But I was able to edit it with a hex editor, and it made no sense. It was just, A, B, C, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, there's no words here or anything. But I'm like, somewhere in here, one of these numbers is how much money I have in this game. I will just go through and I will change one number at a time, or I think I saved the game with a specific dollar amount, and then I searched through all the hex code for that number, and I found that number in the hex code, and I was like, okay, is this my money? And of course, when I changed it and loaded the game crashed, and I tried again and again, and
Right, corrupted.
eventually I was able to figure out how to give myself, unlimited money in SimCity. And I was like, this is amazing. I can't believe I did this, and I cracked it. And I think that experience of not following a tutorial on like how to hack this, but actually figuring it out on your own is so much more amazing than just like listening to someone teach you about it, because you're poking around in the dark. You're not sure if this is even possible. You don't know if anyone's ever done this before. And I think I talked about this on the Joe Grand episode about a true hacker is someone who doesn't follow a tutorial, but is someone who pushes the bounds of what's possible. And that's what gives Joe his hacker ethos still today, is that he's just continually doing things that are impossible to do. But he's like, yeah, there's no tutorial I could read on this, but I'm going to try to figure it out. And I think there's just something so special about that spirit of figuring out something that nobody has done before. And maybe they have, maybe you just haven't figured out like where to
Sure.
find that information, but it doesn't matter. There's just that chase of discovering how to do this all on your own. And then, gosh, it is a profound moment. I remember that all my life, right?
Yeah, it makes me think about just, coming up in the IT world. I was a help desk tech. That was my intro to IT, and sort of followed a trajectory from help desk into sysadmin. And one of the highs that you still kind of chase is, one, solving the problem that doesn't have a documented solution. And that feeling when like, hey, you finally get that thing, that server, whatever, to boot back up after fighting it and dealing with all the fear of like, oh man, we're gonna have to restore this thing. And you finally get it back up. Like it's a high that you chase in working in IT.
It sure is. I've lots of stories like that where I was upgrading a firewall, and of course they're remote, and so you don't have the ability to do something, and it doesn't not come back up, and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing's on the other side of the world. What can I do? And so you start poking at other nearby devices. Can they see it? What do they have? They don't have a port up. Okay, so this one's still okay. And you learn like how to be resilient. Just because it's not up, it's not working. You're like, nope, I have 10 other tools to try. Let's go down the list of see if I can, go here and do this. Oh, it has a failover system. And can the failover system talk to the main system? Yes. Wow. So now we can get in through the failover and the backdoor or an ILO port or something like this to find a way into this thing. And sure enough, you rescue something from the dead, and you just feel amazing after you do it, because you're like, man, this is not in any of the documentation, but we did it.
Yeah, I say often to network folks, like, I don't think you're truly a network engineer until you've locked yourself out of a remote device and had to either drive in to reset it or had someone go in and pull the plug. You learn that lesson mostly once, because then you figure out, okay, I can set a reload command in 5 minutes, and if it locks me out, hey, the config wipes again.
Yeah, that trial by fire is definitely something that makes you a really strong engineer.
I was thinking about, my first hack. The first thing that I did that I thought like, ooh, there's something here. I was very into video games, and that was kind of where my tech passion came out of, because I started to build computers because I wanted better video game performance, always chasing additional frames and that sort of thing. And that meant academics took a back seat, and I fell very deep into, wanting to play video games late into the night. If you remember those old Linksys WRT, I forget the model number, but everyone had those blue Linksys routers. At some point, they were capable of MAC address filtering. And my dad, who was, techie, figured out how he could block at a certain hour my gaming computer's MAC address. And so I would put on the front, like, hey, it shut me down at the end of the night, pretend I go to bed, then I'd wake up, move the Ethernet cable to my backup computer, hit the old admin on the Linksys router, because, default password, go in and turn off the MAC address filter, plug back in, good to go for a couple hours of late night gaming.
Nice.
Turns out, benefited a whole career. It starts with something like that, but I built such a passion out of wanting to do, wanting to play video games that I tell people now, like, video games surprisingly became a huge reason that I have an IT career, because I've learned so much about how networks work, how systems work, how to get performance, how to troubleshoot things, operating systems, just out of that desire. Like, hey, I just want to, play video games.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, not only that,
Where,
but also
where did
typing
your,
skills.
yeah, definitely. And the amount of, creative writing is another one. The amount of writing I did on, like, again, go back to forums or just the amount of chat, got really good at writing and getting a message across in text, because the hours and the days spent in that early internet, I was, almost like having a second life as a teenager growing up in that time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think there was somebody said something to me early on in my career, which is, if you can explain complex topics simply, there's a lot of money in it. And I didn't understand that concept for the longest time. I mean, I was trying at work, but they weren't giving me raises, but they were happy that I was like able to explain complex topics. And, then I started a blog and I was like, okay, I'll try to explain complex topics here as simple as I can. And I think all that was just practice for when I got to Darknet Diaries, to be like, oh, there's this, we're going to talk about SQL injection, and I'm going to explain it as simply as I can, and not getting lost in the muck of it, but just like go straight to
Yeah.
the important part of it. And now you understand what this is without, getting too lost in it, is something I think a lot of people appreciate. Which it's really interesting when you see someone so good at something that they can explain it in such simple terms. And I love that when somebody is just new to something, they're not sure what's the important part, or all the pitfalls or something. And so when they explain something, you could tell that they're novice at this topic, but it's a combination of getting to know that thing a lot. Like you've gone through this troubleshooting step like a million times, and you're like, okay, well, hold on, I could explain exactly how to fix this. Um, but yeah, I definitely I agree at this point that if you can explain complex topics simply, there is money in it.
Yeah, so that's, like a unicorn functionally in the IT space, when you can find somebody that gets a concept and then can explain to stakeholders, especially in the business
Yes.
world. The business is driven by business objectives, not IT's objectives. And specifically in cybersecurity, where it's often seen as just a cost center, and the motivation is, get me the minimum threshold to be quote unquote secure for the lowest amount of money. As an industry, we really struggle to communicate to business stakeholders about why, certain things are important, why we need to protect against SQL injection, what could happen. And I think a lot of folks struggle to communicate outside of the super technical, the jargony stuff that just goes over everyone else's head.
Yeah, that's incredibly good soft skill to learn, which is communication with even people outside your team, and explaining to them the importance of what you're doing, and putting it in their terms, right? Like, okay, well, you've done risk analysis before. How is it going? Like, let's start with that, and it doesn't necessarily go into the technical aspects of it, but like, what's important? What are the important risks of the business that you're concerned about, and what do you like? I don't know. The people who are leaders of companies are typically really smart. They have higher
Yeah.
education degrees. They have jobs that have demanded quite a lot of cognitive skill, and so they can talk quite a lot of not so much the technical stuff. They don't understand the bits and bytes that you're looking at and hands on keyboard kind of stuff, but they're pretty smart people. And so if you just somehow put it in a language that they can understand, they'll understand it. It doesn't take a lot, but we do miss the ball on it a lot, and don't convey the importance to them.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think we're making some ground there. I've found, in the last 5 or 10 years, there's been a lot of non-traditional entrants into IT and, cybersecurity. Folks who aren't always hands-on keyboard, who are better soft skills and can be good communicators on our behalf. So I've seen a lot more of that. It's a much larger, community now, cybersecurity. It's a massive thing. And, now these are some of the biggest conferences in the world, these cybersecurity focused conferences. And it's not just the hackers going to DEFCON. It's, RSA is inviting, I think, the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security was at RSA this year. So it's clearly huge.
Yeah. They're always inviting someone from the government there, but it seems to be impacting all. Right? So security is important to all sectors at this point.
I want to talk about where security might be going from an emerging technology standpoint. I'm curious your take on things like AI and its impact that it'll have on security and privacy, and how you're going to defend that in this new age where AI is taking over, or potentially, if you believe the hype.
I think the important thing that it's on the front burner right now, which is ID mandates are going across the world, right? So in Australia, they're going to be implementing it, I think, in December. It's you can't go on YouTube if you're under 16. And in order to prove that you're under 16, you have to show your ID. And so now it's like, okay, I have to show an ID and so what Australia's come up with is search engines are the problem, because when people can search, they could search for anything, and when anything pops up, then kids could see things that they shouldn't be seeing. So pretty much all search engines, which includes Google Maps, you're going to have to show ID in order to access, so that kids don't see the wrong stuff. So that's rolling out in Australia. You've got chat control in Europe, which is it got voted down just last week, but it's going to be voted again next month. Basically, this is the governments of Europe want to be able to eavesdrop on all chat messages. So this essentially breaks end-to-end encryption. I don't see how this is feasible at all. Right. But the idea is, they want to be able to look into every single email, every single chat message, and they're going to pass a law, or at least vote on this law. And I think, what is it? England has a similar thing of ID mandates that are getting rolled out, where they're going to require IDs to go onto certain social media apps in order to prove your age. I think it's because parents have to approve that their kids go on, so the parents have to show that the kids is allowed by showing ID or something like this. I can't remember the details there. But there's also a dozen states that have started enforcing IDs to be shown in order to go on social media as well. And so it's coming here in America. And so I think this is what we're going to see in the next few years, which is ID required sites for quite a lot of the internet. And it's really disheartening to me as a privacy person to see such personal information that's going to just be enforced by the government. Say, hey, you can't go around this. This is a government mandate, and we've taken over the internet. We've put our hooks and claws on the internet to make sure. And there's this thing called the third party doctrine, which is, if you give your data to a third party or any company, then the government no longer thinks that you have a reasonable right to that privacy. If you keep your privacy, then the government's like, the Fourth Amendment is there, and they're like, well, you have a right to your privacy. But if you've given your data to someone, then they're like, you're already giving it to someone. You obviously don't care about your privacy. And so this can be used in conjunction with this forced ability to give us your ID to get on this site. And by the way, since you gave us your ID, obviously you don't care about your privacy, so we're not going to use the Fourth Amendment here. We're allowed to ask that company for all your data, and that company has to comply with the government because of the third party doctrine.
Disheartening. It's a good word to describe it. And there was a headline recently. It was a Danish minister talking to the EU, and I can't remember the quote exactly, but the quote was something like, "Hey, we need to dispel this notion that everyone has a right to, communicate with encryption, to have totally end-to-end encrypted communication," which was such a disappointing thing to hear from an otherwise beacon of progressive ideas that is Scandinavia, Denmark, and the EU. You think of GDPR and all the strides that's made, some good, some bad, and now to see man, even over there, they're talking about cracking down on encrypted communications because they want to be able to eavesdrop. It's concerning. One of the things I've talked about on this podcast, because again, we have a lot of U.S. national security type folks, we talk a lot about the big threat that is China, that is Russia, our adversaries, and they're now having kinetic impact through their cyber attacks. I mean, they're bringing down water supply systems, hospitals, things that we can now directly say, like, this caused loss of life. I'm concerned that as those things escalate and ramp up, the temptation to have tighter control over network connections coming into the United States is going to grow too large for, the government to not put policy in place. And the extreme version of that would be something like Chinese Great Firewall. I don't think we can necessarily achieve that, but it just seems like we're gaining ground or losing ground from a privacy standpoint, and the forces that want to exact control are gaining ground. Meanwhile, it's getting scarier and scarier to not have that under control. And I think there's going to be fewer and fewer people interested in privacy when, people can just point to and say, like, well, look, if we don't lock this down, if we don't tightly control this, the Chinese are going to come in and wreak havoc. Your teenagers will see things that you don't want them to see on the internet. Disheartening, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am worried about the FCC as well, because what did we have? PIPA and SOPA during like 2017, 2018, where Njit Pai, this FCC chairman, wanted to
Yeah.
regulate the internet in such a way that would have just ruined it. It would have been like, what, you could pay this much to get here, and then you pay this much to get over here, but good luck trying to get outside the US kind of thing. And it's just like, if you could put these tiers and these checkpoints on the internet so that the internet, because I believe in an open and free internet, and it's not that it's free as in it's costs nothing, but it's free as in there's no limits or boundaries to where you're allowed to go. And so now what you've got is the government trying to limit where we're allowed to go, and that doesn't make it free or open anymore. And this exchange of ideas and to be able to go online and learn stuff and hear what other people are saying is just such a crucial aspect to our lives that taking that away is definitely a control of information that is a step in the wrong direction for what's good for the people. But it would the leaders would get more power in this way. And so it's always a fight that the government is trying to get themselves more power and take more control of the internet when it just benefits them and it doesn't benefit us. So that's just another thing I'm worried about is that stuff coming back around, and the FCC just mandating all kinds of regulations on the internet that we don't want.
Yeah, it goes back again for the fifth time. I just think about, man, the early internet, that I think so much of the excitement, the passion was that it was unlimited. I can't remember the site, but there was a site, Stumble Upon, which was a great way to waste hours just stumbling upon some esoteric community online or some webpage somebody created. It was just so exciting and interesting. And then getting to speak to people, from other countries, from other cultures, that exchange of ideas that the internet has opened up, and you can play video games with these people and you can bond over something like that while you're so different and have such different life experiences. That's so valuable and creates such a sort of this magic experience that, man, I'd hate to see that degrade to the point where you can only get to sanctioned sources of information. You can only communicate with sanctioned communications providers, and never in a way that feels truly private, because, all the communications providers have to be able to respond to the government when they ask for your data. That would effectively, in my mind, sort of kill the spirit of the internet.
Yeah, it sure would. But you did mention the Great Wall of China, the Great Firewall of China, which is exactly that. And so it's not completely out of the idea, or out of the out of the idea of possibility of doing that. Where in China, they're only allowed to go to specific websites. They're not allowed to go to the entire internet, and they are highly censored as well. So there's certain terms and topics and stuff that they cannot look up and they cannot read about. And it becomes this real control of information. It's an information monopoly, if you ask me, of saying, we will give you the information that you're allowed to have. And the fact that that's gone on for so long is really scary as well, that there hasn't been some sort of revolt around that or something. But Yeah, that's a possibility that it can spread to more countries. It's not completely out of the idea
Yeah.
that it could come here. So we need to be really protective of our internet and not go in any direction that is. It's a great firewall China has gone into, right? And because we can't have that kind of censorship, it would be devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think at the national level across the world, they're starting to see a desire to draw borders on what was ultimately a borderless concept, the internet.
Uh-huh.
But now everyone's going to have their sovereign, their sovereign space, their sovereign control of it, which, concerning.
Mhm.
I want to ask, I mentioned AI. I talk to a lot of folks who talk about AI like it's, we've talked about the fourth industrial revolution. It's going to change the world. I've obviously dabbled in it, and I've used things like Claude Code to see what it can write up. And sometimes I go back and forth on how I feel about AI. Sometimes I'm all in on the hype, and I'm like, this is the next thing. It is the fourth industrial revolution. I've even started to wonder, like, SaaS as a model, is that going to be gone in 10 years? Because now if you have a tool you want, you just tell an AI, hey, build me a tool that does exactly what I want. So sometimes I feel that way, but sometimes I'm also like, it's just, we've had AI. It's been around. Anyone that's played video games has interacted with AI. It's just, this is
Yeah,
the
right.
next level.
I remember that Halo, the first
Where do you
Halo.
fall on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first Halo had some really interesting enemies that would really try to outsmart you. And I'm like, this, and we called it AI then. We're like, the enemies are AI driven. This is amazing. And yeah, it feels like it's been here for a while. But I'm starting to become a big fan of Ray Kurzweil. And he, I think in the 90s, wrote a book called The Singularity is Near. And the idea here is that and he just rewrote it last year. The singularity is nearer, but the idea is um, the computers are going to get to become so smart that they're going to be able to self-replicate their self-code their own
Right.
system. So you give them a goal, and they're like, okay, I think I could do this better than what you have written here, and so I'll rewrite it. And then it's, oh, you know what? I think now that I've rewritten it this way, I see some ways to tweak it, and I could rewrite it this way. And so when they can just write their own code and improve upon it and just iterate 1,000,000 times in one day and test it and go again and again until they've just perfected whatever it is that they're trying to do, that is where singularity is going to happen, which is an exponential breakthrough of technology where things are going to improve at a rate that we've never seen things improve. New technologies emerging, new medicines coming out, new way, like self-driving cars will just be like, I mean, once the computer knows how to, if you could get 1,000,000 computers to build a self-driving car, and they're way smarter than us already, then they could just like instantly whip it up. It'll just be such a
Right.
fast moving place. And this is really something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, is the singularity of like, what happens when computers outpace us as far as how fast we can code and create, and how productive they are, and how they can just do it better than us. And it is a wild thought to try to think about, because in one hand, it feels like it is going to be out of control, because that just seems to be the nature of it. It's refactoring at a speed that we can't understand or even see the results that we're looking for. Like, it might give us the results, but then it might be like, well, by the way, I invented these other 10 things that you didn't ask for. And it's like, oh wow, those are really fascinating things. So there's going to be all kinds of unforeseen results, and
Yeah.
it's really going to be a fascinating world. I like the Socrates idea of future shock, which is if you aren't familiar with the world, and you don't know how things have changed, and I don't know, you somehow go to sleep for like 1,000 years and then wake up, the world is going to be so changed that you're not going to be able to cope, and you're going to have such a difficult time managing this brand new world that you just woke up into. That it could have some serious effects on you. It actually might kill you for all we know, right? And so if we put our heads in the sand and say, no, I'm not going to follow what's going on with AI, or I'm not going to keep up with it, and it suddenly is like 30 times crazier than we expected, when we finally do pay attention to it, it is going to feel like a shock. I remember a few times in this AI revolution we've been in the last few years, I've looked at it and I'm just like, okay, I have a degree in computer engineering. I've been working as a security engineer for, a decade. I've coded a million things. I know how computers work. I know how the internet works. I can explain to you everything, but I have no idea how this LLM is working, how ChatGPT is working. What in the heck is going on here? This is insane. And I felt that version, like a small version of future shock, which is like, suddenly I feel like a fossil on the internet. I don't know how the internet works anymore. It's magic. And when it's magic, it then becomes scary, because you're like, I don't know what it's capable of tomorrow, or how any of this is working. And you don't have your finger on the pulse of like reality anymore. You're just like, I'm living in this magic world. I don't know how this is working. This doesn't make sense to me. And that is a frightening world to live in. And for
Yeah.
me, what I did to get over that was, okay, well, if I don't know how it, like, video games and such, I can look at them and say, okay, I can imagine how this is built. I can imagine how they, built the environments and the world and the code and all that stuff. But I just couldn't imagine how ChatGPT was built, or how I would make it. And I would go on to like TensorFlow's website and be like, how do I make AI? And they're like, oh, you use this and this. And I'm like, this makes no sense. I don't understand what tensors are. This is ridiculous. How do you go from tensor to having it talk to you in English? This doesn't make sense at all. And so I was just really struggling with trying to make sense of it. And I took a step back and I said, okay, well, if I don't know how to code it, let me at least learn how to be like a great user of it, like a super user of ChatGPT, of these AI tools. And so I went into this world. I made this this goal of, I'm going to try 100 AI tools in 100 days, right? One different tool each day, and get a really good sense of this world of AI that I'm in. And I think I only made it to like day 4, which is when I found Midjourney. And then I was like, holy cow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I just got stuck on that for weeks before moving on. And I didn't actually go beyond that. But I have used a lot of AI tools since then. But the idea that is, I think, that I'm at now, which is, I understand AI. I understand how to use AI, and I understand its limits and where it breaks down, and how it can't progress past this, or how it won't be able to go, it won't be able to do these tasks that I'm asking it to do. And I'm like, okay, if I can stay on that understanding of like how capable it is, then that's great. But now that I understand that, oh, okay, it can only do this much, it gives me a better understanding of what's under the hood, and how it's made, and what it's thinking, and how it's delivering these results, and how it's working. And so I think that is my stepping stone to keeping up with it, is to, without feeling like the world is made of magic, and without feeling like the floor doesn't exist anymore and I'm just floating in the air, is to understand how these tools work, to be a user of it. And when I look back at how I learned about computers, it was the same thing. Getting Linux, I was like, I don't know how to be a Linux admin, but let's first start by being a Linux user. And there's a big difference between the two. and so once you become a user for a while, then you're like, well, now I want to change the colors or the kernel or whatever it is. And this is where you start learning like admin stuff. And so that's where I think I'm at in my AI world. I was like, well, I wish it would do this. Now let me see if I can start pulling in some of these APIs or agents or something to get it to do this. And then you start, building your own stuff. And so that's kind of been my journey there with AI.
The future shock is a fascinating concept. And, I think it would make sense for Socrates to talk about it as 1,000 years. I think, we're compressing that timeline every day of what the amount of time difference will be for a completely different world. I think it's Anthropic CEO talk about they're kind of, humanity's building N in terms of AI, but we're building N so that it can create N+1. And once that happens, once the AI can do the +1 on itself, I think we immediately lose control of it. I mean, just the amount of iteration and growth it can do to try to keep our hands around how it's working seems like it could be impossible, or at least incredibly challenging.
Mm-hmm. There's just such a significant upside to all of it. So I think if you feel like, oh, there's doom here, and there's catastrophic events in our horizon and all this sort of thing. This is going to make you miserable, and you're going to feel upset about like every day of the future and all this sort of thing. And so I don't want to have this kind of miserable outlook on things. I like to be an optimist. And in order to do that, I've got to embrace whatever is coming, because I can't stop it. There's nothing I can do to be like, all right,
Right.
stop AI, stop, dude, you're going to kill us all. So if I can't stop it, then it's not so much join it, but it is be excited about it. It's even more than joining it. It's to be like, okay, show me how the cool stuff is going to happen, and then okay, cool. I like this. This could be really cool if this happens. And like one thing I understand, which is fascinating to me, the idea of like almost like zero knowledge. I don't remember the exact term, something like that, but the idea that we almost have to unlearn what we know to learn some of the new things that we're going to learn in the future. There's just non-logical ways to solve things or create things or build things that we know to do it this way, and so we almost have to step back to not square one but square zero and say, wait, okay, let's just open it up. This is our goal, but let's even make it bigger than that. Here's our abstract goal. It's not so much I want to create this thing, but I want to create that thing because I want to be happy. And so, oh, okay, you want to be happy. Well, here's something that can make you happy, right? And so you almost like you have to. There's going to be just a fascinating way of everything is going to change. Not everything, but so much is going to change of how we learn and how we solve problems. And I'm really fascinated by this because it's really going to make us think in ways that we've never thought before on, oh, I didn't know you could go backwards in order to go forwards, right? Like this sort of stuff. We've always gone in this direction to solve this thing. So yeah, there's a bunch of exciting things coming out, and I'm excited for it all. I try to be optimist for all of the future.
So we often on the Watchers, we talk about things, and I tend to put maybe a pessimistic spin on things. Like AI could be the tool of, the great tool of our threat actors, right? Like what's going to empower threat actors more than AI at this point? Creating malware at such a scale and able to compound it and make it more advanced. So we certainly have challenges, but you're right to bring it back to, well, look at all the good it might be able to do. There's so much promise in how it will impact things like research and medical innovation, and just this challenging of how we think we have to solve problems today could introduce whole new ways of looking at things that we're just not aware of and really not able to think about now. We just have to kind of get there, which is perfect because the way I always love to end an episode of The Watchers is talking about optimism. Because I think when we talk to people who are deep in this industry and have energy and passion for it, they're the people that we need solving hard problems, these challenging problems, and preventing the bad outcomes. So they need to have their passion and they need to have optimism. And I'm always interested from a personal level. Where do people find that optimism? And I love that you volunteered. Like, hey man, I'm an optimist at heart. Like that's the spin I got to put on things. That's the lens that I want to live in. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from. You got me off the guard there. Just the idea, I think that you get to choose what you're going to feel. Like you think, oh, my first reaction of this feeling is the true one. That's the one that matters to me. But we've all been in situations where whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, your brain isn't always doing what's in your best interest. It wants me to grab the Doritos and it doesn't want me to grab the broccoli, right? And so
A guilty pleasure.
Yes.
Sure.
And so it's not doing what's best for me. And you've got to stop and think, okay, well, hold on. If my brain isn't trusted, if my emotions aren't trusted, then what is? And I don't remember where I'm going with this, but somehow it connects back to just being optimist. You get to choose. Yeah, that's it. You get to choose what to put, what emotions to focus on and what to do. And if I get to choose between pessimism and optimism, optimism is a harder one. So the other thing is, it's easy to complain. It's so easy to complain. Everyone can do it. Even a baby. They complain about
It's kind of
everything.
all they do.
Yes. And so the hard thing to do is to find the good in something. The hard thing to do is find the solution, to the step forward. Okay, yes, I have 1,000 things to complain about, but I'm really happy that this is the thing that we have here, that this is what we're working with. Let's go forward with that. And that, I think, is the hard way. It's the lazy way is the complaints. And so I don't want to be that lazy person that's just like, oh, I'm full of complaints. I want to do the hard work of finding the solution, finding the right foot forward, finding the path. And that, to me, it means that I have to just stick with optimism and have that optimistic framework of I'm always looking for the good in something in order to, okay, grab onto that. That's how we're going to get out of this situation. If you're finding the bad, you're never going to get out of that situation. You're going to stay in there. And just thinking about anything that you've gone through, like emotionally, asking someone out and they saying no, you could just stick with that and be like, well, of course they said no. I'm a terrible person. I don't deserve them. You could just ruminate on yourself. And if you hang on to those negative things, then you're never going to get out of that situation. But you could just switch it around and say, well, I probably dodged a bullet there. There's probably a person that would have brought me down, and I've got a million other people that I could choose out of. This is great. I'm excited to find the next person to ask out or something, right? You find something optimistic about it, and now you're feeling good about yourself and you're moving on with your day. And so to me, it's just kind of a crucial thing to get out of it. All the sticky situations I've been in is to find something good to get out of it. And when we talk about, threat actors and stuff using AI, I think we've always had this arms race in security, which is, oh, somebody found a vulnerability. Great. Now the defense team has to find a signature for it or a detection for it so that we can spot this when it happens or patch for it. And we've always had this arms race, which is as soon as they have that vulnerability, we have to fix it. As soon as we have that vulnerability, we have to fix it. And I think it's the same thing with AI. As soon as they have this capability of, oh my God, they can do 1 million operations a second by, completely automate the pen test against 1 million companies at once or whatever. Great. Well, now we have the AI so that we can detect when this stuff is happening. Like, hey, if you see another AI in our network, please let me know, right? And so we have this arms race, I think, is just going to continue up. As soon as the AI becomes smart enough to do some sort of hack, the AI is going to become smart enough to detect that hack. And so I'm not too worried about it in that sense of it being, oh, of course the threat actors are going to get this. No, one of the early things that I saw, come out of AI was Copilot. And I was like, and it was GitHub Copilot. So there's Microsoft Copilot and GitHub Copilot. It gets confusing, but GitHub Copilot, I was like, oh my gosh, is this a thing that is going to help me write secure code? Like this is a birdie over my shoulder being like, hey, you forgot to, close that pointer or whatever it is. This is great because this is going to help me make more secure code. Do not let me push to GitHub if it's insecure. Do not let me put secrets on GitHub. Do not let me do any of these things. And Copilot isn't exactly doing that. It's helping you write code, but not so much safe and secure code. But the idea is that hopefully these AI tools do give us this ability to be like 100%, I've double checked, triple checked all your stuff. You are good to go. This is not going to be a problem. And I don't think it's there yet because the way vibe coding is that it's full of vulnerabilities. But I think if you can convince an AI tool to be like, no, listen, here are the unit tests that you need to be doing. Do not put in any code that don't satisfy. And maybe just feed it like a whole white paper of like, these are all the tests that you should be running. Every time that you suggest some new code, make sure it satisfies these 100 OWASP top 10. Make sure you're checking against OWASP top 10 before suggesting any code, because I don't want this to happen. And then once it gets trained on that, then it's just like, good. I'm good, man. I will write the most secure code you've ever seen. And I think that's in the an inevitable future. And so as soon as people get to exploit the code, we're going to have rock solid code that's stronger than ever.
It'll be a bit like watching the matrix screens of the red team and the blue team AIs going at it.
Yeah.
Just at rapidly iterating pace.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Jack, I I love the eloquence in talking about optimism, and I share the optimistic outlook on things. We obviously have our work cut out for us, but I see the challenge there, and I love the challenge. And I think so many people in this industry do. I will just add, not to totally glaze you up, but I think Darknet Diaries as a product or whatever you want to call it does such a service to this industry. The amount of people who I think either refine their passion or can sort of go to that as a source of passion. I know I do it regularly when the monotony, the day-to-day of this stuff, it's hard. You're dealing with challenging problems. You're dealing with people. Oftentimes I'll go on a binge when I'm like feeling down and out about IT and cybersecurity and just like, man, go back to this fascinating bit of media about what's going on and about sort of what we're working against and the human side, the dark side of things. So as a listener, as a fan, I truly appreciate what you put out. And I think obviously the proof is in the pudding, the amount of influence and the reach and the audience it's built. I hope you're super proud of it because it's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I love those. That's very nice of you.
Jack, I truly appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thank you so much. For folks that, don't know you or haven't interacted, where can they find you?
Darknetdiaries.com is a great spot, but I am most active on X these days. So if you find me on there, I'll be able to respond. We also have a Discord that you can join. That's probably my favorite place on the internet to be right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jack.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Watchers. For more great content, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our channel. We'll see you on the next one.